I'm a 32-year-old man, a military veteran, currently using my GI Bill to pursue a college education in a city located in one of the mountain time zone states. Life hasn't been easy since I left the service. The adjustment back into civilian life has been more difficult than I imagined. For years, my world had been defined by structure, routine, and purpose. I was part of something much bigger than myself, and I lived in a way that demanded discipline: waking up early, performing my duties, being part of a team, and relying on each other. But now, without the military to hold me in line, I was forced to navigate the vast sea of uncertainty that came with being an ordinary civilian again. The transition has been a whirlwind. School and assignments consume most of my time. Balancing part-time jobs to pay my bills while keeping up with classes and maintaining my mental health has stretched me thin. I feel like I'm barely holding on, much less having time to socialize. The camaraderie I once shared with fellow soldiers was now replaced by the anonymity of lecture halls and coffee shops. As someone used to the tight-knit bonds of military life, the solitary existence I now led left me feeling disconnected. I wasn't interested in the college party scene. I wasn't someone who hit up clubs or bars every weekend. Those days felt like a lifetime ago. I had very little time for dating, but I knew I couldn't shut myself off forever. So, like many people in my situation, I turned to dating apps. They seemed like the easiest way to meet someone while managing my crazy schedule. I wasn't expecting much, to be honest. I figured it would be another empty experience, swiping through a sea of profiles with no real connection. But at this point, I figured I'd give it a shot. The few free moments I had felt lonely, and perhaps a little companionship could help ease that loneliness. It was on a Thursday night that I came across her profile. She was in her early 30s, much like me, and her photos immediately stood out. There was something about her eyes, dark, mysterious, yet warm, and her smile, which seemed effortless but captivating. She was beautiful, no doubt, but it was her natural charm and the genuine look in her eyes that drew me in. We exchanged a few messages, and the conversation immediately flowed. She seemed real, down to earth, and shared many of my interests: books, movies, hiking, and even a few bands I was into. We agreed to meet at a local bar restaurant that was conveniently located for both of us. It was in a nice area, casual enough to be comfortable but still with an upscale vibe. I was looking forward to it, hoping for the best but not getting my hopes too high. I hadn't been on many dates since I started school, and I wasn't sure how well I would do in this new environment of meeting people. When I arrived, I was a little early, but that didn't matter. As soon as she walked in, I was immediately struck by how stunning she was, more so than her photos. She wore a simple black dress, her dark hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. There was no pretension about her, no overdone makeup or flashy outfit. She radiated a natural beauty that made it easy to relax. She smiled when she saw me, and I felt an immediate warmth in her presence. We sat down and started chatting. The chemistry was undeniable. We shared stories, talked about our college experiences, and laughed about silly things. The conversation was easy, comfortable, even. We connected right away. As the evening wore on, we found more common ground, from favorite books and movies to hiking trails we both had on our bucket lists. It felt like one of those rare moments when you meet someone, and it just clicks. She told me she worked at the local police station, not in a law enforcement role but as a receptionist. I was intrigued. Her job sounded stressful, and I could tell it affected her at times, but she didn't seem overly bothered by it. She shared how difficult it could be to deal with the kinds of people who came through the station, both criminals and victims alike. Despite the challenges, she seemed to take pride in her work. At some point, she mentioned that her roommate was out of town for the holidays, and she was spending the time alone. It seemed like a casual mention, but it piqued my interest, especially when she went on to say that she hated being alone because of her ex-boyfriend, who had stalked her. She mentioned it so nonchalantly, like it was just another detail of her life. But for me, it raised a red flag. I didn't ask for details, but the idea of someone still lingering in her life, someone who had stalked her, felt unsettling. I didn't want to push, though, so I let it slide, hoping she was just being dramatic. As the night went on, the mood stayed light, and we had a couple more drinks. Things were going well, maybe too well. Eventually, she suggested we go back to her place. Honestly, I wasn't about to say no. She was gorgeous, and the chemistry between us was undeniable. I paid my tab, and she insisted on driving us there. I offered to drive, but she wouldn't hear it. She mentioned that I'd had a couple of drinks and that she didn't want me risking a DUI. I thought it was a bit overprotective, but I didn't mind. It seemed like a harmless suggestion. When we arrived at her place, I began to feel a strange unease. I followed her up to the door, and that's when I noticed something that didn't sit right. She opened the door without unlocking it first. I remembered her telling me about her stalker ex, so why would she leave her door unlocked? It didn't make sense, but I let it slide. I wasn't about to start making judgments now. She walked in and immediately started feeding her cat. I began casually looking around the kitchen, trying to settle into the environment, when I saw something strange. On the counter was a bowl of cereal, and the milk was still cool to the touch. It didn't make sense. It hadn't been sitting there long, and the milk wasn't soggy. When I asked her about it, she hesitated before saying she had eaten it before coming to the bar. But something about her story didn't add up. Why would she leave a fresh bowl of cereal out like that? But I didn't press her. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe she just didn't want to clean up before we left. Still, the odd feeling in my stomach didn't go away. She kissed me then, pulling me toward her bedroom, and I couldn't help but get lost in the moment. We made our way to the bedroom, and things escalated quickly. I went to close the curtains, but she stopped me. "Leave them open," she said in a low voice, her gaze never leaving mine. I thought it was a little strange, but I didn't question her. It was her house, after all. Then came the gasp. It was loud and full of fear, and I turned just in time to see a figure in a hoodie running from the window. I froze. My heart dropped to my stomach as my mind tried to make sense of what had just happened. Who was that? I jumped up, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I rushed to the door to check if it was locked. Of course, It wasn't. Panic surged through me as I quickly locked it. The second I did, I heard loud banging from the outside. The sound sent a chill down my spine. "Who the hell is that?" I shouted. "Is that your ex?" She nodded nonchalantly, almost as if this was a regular occurrence. "Don't worry about it," she said calmly. "It's just him. He does this sometimes. He'll go away." That's when my mind started to race. How could she be so calm? How was she so unfazed by the situation? I wasn't about to let this slide. This wasn't just some minor annoyance. Someone was trying to break into her house, and she was acting like it was no big deal. I stood there, asking her why the door was unlocked, why the cereal was still out, why she seemed so nonchalant. She couldn't give me a logical explanation for any of it. And that's when I knew something wasn't right. Suddenly, the banging moved to the side of the house, and I could hear footsteps running around the back. My mind was in overdrive now. I had to leave, but I couldn't just walk out without understanding what was really going on. I quickly ordered an Uber, hoping to leave without further incident. But as I stood by the door, ready to make my escape, she tried to coax me back to the bedroom. She kept insisting that it was fine and that we should just ignore the banging. But I couldn't ignore it. Not this time. I grabbed my jacket and shoes, and I bolted. I didn't say a word. I wasn't about to stick around any longer. The fear in my chest was overwhelming, and I knew I had to get out of there. I opened the door, ran outside, and sprinted toward the curb where my Uber was waiting. I glanced back once, and I saw her standing in the doorway, watching me go. I didn't know if she was relieved or if she was just as detached from the whole situation as she had been the entire time. As the Uber sped away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something much darker. I didn't know if it was a robbery, a setup, or something even worse. But one thing was clear: I wasn't going to let myself fall into something like that again. It's been over a month since that night, and I'm still trying to make sense of everything. I reported the incident to Uber and told the bartender what had happened, hoping they would warn the next guy. But even now, I can't get that night out of my head. Was I just being paranoid, or was I truly in danger? The pieces of the puzzle don't add up, and I'm not sure I'll ever get the full picture. All I know is that I trusted my gut, and it saved me that night. But I can't help but wonder, what if I hadn't left? What if I had stayed and ignored all the warning signs? I don't think I'll ever truly know what was going on in that house, but I'm certain of one thing: I'm never putting myself in a situation like that again. A strange encounter, my night at the Airbnb. It was a crisp December evening when I found myself in a new city for a concert I had been eagerly waiting for. As a solo traveler, I had become accustomed to booking rooms on platforms like Airbnb, so this time was no different. I had found a cheap and convenient room listed in a local neighborhood. The listing seemed promising enough. It was affordable, within walking distance of the concert venue, and the photos looked like it had character. I had spent the afternoon exploring the city, soaking in the sights and trying to enjoy my solo journey. But as the evening approached and I prepared to check in, something felt a little off. Maybe it was the weather changing, or maybe it was just me overthinking everything. Regardless, I was tired and just wanted to get some rest before the concert. The listing indicated that the host was a couple, which seemed normal enough. Upon my arrival, however, I was met with a twist I wasn't expecting. As I came down the stairs to the entrance, I heard someone turning the key in the front door. My heart raced slightly. I wasn't expecting anyone this soon. I had been under the impression that the couple was supposed to be home, and I was half expecting to meet the wife or girlfriend of the guy I had originally communicated with. However, to my surprise, an older middle-aged man stepped through the door. He looked up at me and introduced himself as Tim. At first, I was confused. I had never spoken to a Tim before. My mind raced as I thought, who is this guy? And why didn't anyone mention him? I asked myself why this seemed so strange, but my gut was already uneasy. I tried to mask my discomfort with a friendly hello and exchanged small talk with him. However, it felt forced, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He seemed normal enough, but my suspicion was rising. Feeling the need to leave quickly, I decided it was time to go. I thanked him, excused myself, and left the house as quickly as possible. I was both shaken and confused by the unexpected encounter, unsure of what to make of Tim's sudden appearance. But I tried to push it out of my mind as I had a concert to catch, and I knew I had to focus on having a good time. The concert was fantastic. The music, the crowd, the energy, everything felt like a much-needed release. But despite the great experience, my mind kept wandering back to that odd moment in the Airbnb. After the concert, I was too exhausted to think anymore, and I knew I needed rest. So, I checked into a hostel nearby. The place wasn't perfect, but at least it had Wi-Fi, a functional shower, and a door with a lock. It wasn't ideal, but it would do for the night. The next morning, I was thrown out promptly at 10 a.m., as the hostel had a strict checkout policy. I was already feeling the discomfort of not being in a good place the night before, so I decided to head back to gather my things. When I arrived at the Airbnb again, I was unprepared for what I was about to find. I don't know why, but I decided to check the mail slot near the front door again. As soon as I peered inside, I jumped back in shock. There, sitting on the couch directly in front of the entrance, was the same old man, Tim. He was snoozing, unaware of my presence, and his deep breathing filled the room. What struck me even more was that he wasn't just sleeping, he was wearing a Snorlax onesie, the kind of ridiculous, childish outfit that made me question everything I had experienced so far. It wasn't just the onesie, though. As I took in the scene, I noticed something far stranger. Tim was hooked up to an oxygen tank. The tube ran across the floor and up to his nose. Confused, I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. There was no reason for this man to be wearing a Snorlax onesie or have an oxygen tank, and it felt like I was in the middle of some weird situation that had no logical explanation. I quietly tried to sneak past him to get my things. I went upstairs to my room and noticed the door was slightly ajar. That struck me as odd. I had locked it when I left, so why was it open? As I gathered my things, something smelled odd, like burnt hair. I glanced at the hair curlers that were still on the counter and realized that they had recently been used. The smell was unmistakable. That's when I started feeling a sense of dread creeping in. Was someone in my room? Had they been inside while I was gone? The idea made my skin crawl. Not wanting to stick around any longer, I grabbed everything I could, trying not to make any noise. My heart was pounding, and I just wanted to get out of that house as quickly as possible. As I raced down the stairs to leave, disaster struck. In my haste, I tripped over the oxygen tubes that Tim had been hooked up to. The tube ripped from the tank, and a loud hissing sound filled the room. Tim immediately woke up, gasping for air. His eyes were wide, and he looked at me in panic. I stood there, paralyzed with fear, not knowing what to do. My brain was racing, and in the chaos, all I could say was "I'm sorry" over and over again as I scrambled to leave. I didn't wait for any kind of resolution. I didn't check if he was okay. I just ran straight out the door, slammed it behind me, and bolted. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst. My mind was whirling with confusion and fear, and I could barely comprehend what had just happened. Was this some kind of twisted setup? Or was Tim just an eccentric man who had somehow gotten himself involved in something far more sinister? I ran as fast as I could, desperately trying to shake the feeling of dread that had overtaken me. I quickly got into the nearest Uber and made my way to a more secure location. The ride felt endless, but eventually, I found myself at a nearby coffee shop. I sat there, trying to calm my racing thoughts, but my body still trembled with fear. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen, and I was lucky to have escaped in time. A pattern emerges, the discomfort grows. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the strange events that had unfolded. I couldn't get Tim's strange appearance out of my mind. The Snorlax onesie, the oxygen tank, the unlocked door, the hair curlers, all of it seemed so bizarre. But as I continued with my travels, trying to enjoy the rest of my trip, I began to notice a pattern of unsettling encounters. I had checked into a different Airbnb the next day, and while it was much cleaner and more modern, something about the situation kept bothering me. I started to wonder if maybe I had stumbled into something dangerous without realizing it. Was I unknowingly becoming part of a larger scheme? Was this all leading me to a dangerous situation that I couldn't control? As I stayed in this second place, the questions kept running through my mind. My gut kept telling me to be alert, to not let my guard down. I began to notice odd behaviors in the people I interacted with, some subtle, others more blatant. There was something unsettling about the way certain hosts spoke to me, as if they knew more about me than I had shared. Each interaction left me more uncomfortable than the last. I began asking myself if I was overreacting. Could it just be that I was on edge from everything that had happened? Or was there something much darker lurking beneath the surface? The true horror, unraveling the mystery. It wasn't until later, when I made an unexpected discovery, that everything started to fall into place. I had gone to check the local news to see if anything had been reported about the area I had stayed in, and there it was, an unsettling article about a string of suspicious disappearances that had been occurring in the city. It turned out that several people, mostly travelers, had gone missing after staying in the same neighborhood. Some of them were never found, while others had been reported as found disoriented, with no memory of what had happened to them. The similarities between these cases and my own experience were enough to make my blood run cold. Had I narrowly escaped becoming one of their victims? The more I dug, the more I uncovered. It appeared that the Airbnb I had stayed at wasn't just a random listing, it had been linked to a man who had been under investigation for several years. Tim, the man who had let me in, was apparently involved in a series of bizarre incidents with other travelers, some of whom were never seen again. I felt sick. How had I missed all the warning signs? How had I ended up in the middle of something so sinister without even realizing it? And most of all, why hadn't I trusted my instincts sooner? Conclusion: lessons learned. As I look back on my trip, I can't help but feel both relieved and deeply unsettled by what happened. The strange events at the Airbnb, the odd encounters with Tim, and the unsettling discovery about the area, all of it pointed to something far darker than I could have ever imagined. I'm thankful that I got out when I did, and I've learned valuable lessons about the importance of trusting my instincts. It's easy to brush off strange feelings or signs, but I know now that the smallest details can sometimes reveal the most dangerous truths. If there's anything I've taken away from this experience, it's that sometimes the scariest situations don't always look the way we expect them to. And in the future, I'll always be much more cautious, especially when it comes to trusting strangers and the places I choose to stay. This experience will stay with me forever, a constant reminder to always trust my gut and never ignore the red flags.